Salvate omnes and welcome to this week's video tutorial on third declension adjectives, chapter 16, Wheelock's Latin. This chapter will focus on third declension adjectives. What do we mean by that? Well, exactly as the term suggests, adjectives that have a third declension ending. Let me pull up our declension chart. And so most adjectives follow a first or second declension ending. Hence, so it's either going to end in I, or us, o, or the plural forms. But we have another set of adjectives that have a third declension ending, as do nouns. And these are going to have to be memorized as part of the vocabulary, so you know what ending and what declension a particular adjective signifies. Once again, as we've said several times, since we do not do any English into Latin, we just need to be able to recognize the third declension ending and pretty much treat it as vocabulary in terms of translating into English, because we don't need to produce and write the forms themselves, but rather be able to read, identify, and translate into English. So in practice, this is once again easier than if it were the case where you had to produce the endings from memory and mastery of the concept. So as always, please read through this general description of third declension adjectives and pay particular attention to the examples that they give you here. And then, as always, please learn and study the vocabulary and then do the self-tutorial exercises in the back of the book for which you have the answers, because that will set the stage for an easier go at the sententia antiqui. All right, let's jump right into the lesson proper. So here we have a short sentence by Phaedrus, and quam dulcis est libertas, literally how sweet is liberty. So let me go ahead and write that out. How sweet is liberty. This one's fairly straightforward. Quam means how. I have our wheelocks up and ready to go. Once again, Latin, it can mean a number of things. Only the context will tell you what it means. Since we have an exclamation point, we're using it as an adverb, but you can see only the context will tell you how this particular word is being used. But the context makes it clear how sweet is liberty. So here's our grammar point already. Once again, there's no substitute for careful study of vocabulary. So if you can see this is a third declension adjective. So there's the word, there's the part of speech, and then following the sourcing here, you can see that it's third declension, and then we're going to choose a translation. How pleasant is liberty? How charming is liberty? How sweet is liberty, which I chose. How kind is liberty? How dear is liberty? How soft is liberty? That doesn't make much sense. So again, you can choose maybe pleasant or sweet, make the most sense. Charming, I think, sort of misses the point. But this is the whole point in Latin, in one sense, is you have to make decisions in terms of what words you want to use. So we'll put it all together. How sweet is liberty? Fairly straightforward. Duo by Virgil. Labor omnia vicit. Work, labor, work conquers everything. In other words, with hard work, you can do anything. So let's go ahead and put that up here for number 2. So work conquers all. And let's go back to the language here. Labor, which is a third declension noun. Omnia means everything. And then vicit, where we get words like victory. VIC is the verb in this case. All right, moving on here. So far we really haven't had any, well, we've had an adjective in the third declension, but really nothing that is any different in terms of our approach to Latin than we've done in the previous 15 chapters. Fortuna fortes adjuvat. So here we have fortune helps the brave, so, or the bold. And let's take a look at this third declension adjective just to see your possible translations here. Here it's being used to describe someone, so I think we got to go down here for the accusative plural form, fortes, because that's third declension accusative plural. So again, hopefully you have your declension chart out here. I'm not going to refer to it as much as I have in past lessons. So there's fortes, telling us it's accusative plural. So we go back here to the example, fortune helps fortes, and could be the strong, the powerful, the mighty. I said courageous, but if you want to go strong or powerful, that's fine too. So we go back to our example, fortune helps the courageous. You may have to look up the words here, but adjuhavit, it means helps. Adjudicate, adjunct are other words in English that come from this Latin verb. Quatuor, quam celres et acris es mens. Here we have another word for mind. Animos can also mean mind, but this is where we get words like mental. So how quick and sharp is the mind? Cicero was a great Roman humanist, and he believed in the ability of human beings to use their reason and their minds for great things. So that's sort of the sense of it here. So this is where we get words like celebrity, but it means quick. Once again, you might want to take the time to look up the words so that you can slowly process what these mean in your memory for understanding. But you can see it can mean swift, quick, agile, rapid, speedy, fast, rash, hasty, hurried, lively, early. So I'm going to say quick in my particular reading of it. So how quick and sharp, sometimes this can be translated as keen, K-E-E-N, and then is the mind. So how quick and sharp is the mind? So let's go ahead and put that down there. So how quick and sharp is the mind? How quick and sharp is the mind? All right, so we do have a couple. Celeris and acris are third declension adjectives. So you can see once again, there's the number 3. Same thing with acris. And so that is the grammar topic in this chapter, of course. Once again, you can see it's an adjective of the third declension. But so far, hopefully you agree, nothing too crazy. The sentences are pretty short. Most in learning a language, especially Latin, is just taking the time to use a dictionary and look up the words. Certainly at this level of Latin. Okay, let's take a look at Quinque Polyphemus erat monstrum horrendum informe ingens by Virgil. Polyphemus, of course, was Cyclops, first introduced in Homer's the Odyssey, the children of Poseidon, or Neptune in the Roman Latin tradition. So Polyphemus was a horrendous monster, is how that first part reads. Again, they give us some vocabulary here. If you want to say horrid, that works too. So Polyphemus was a horrid monster. Or we could just quite frankly say horrendous, because I think it has a similar meaning in English. So let's go ahead and write that first clause out. Polyphemus was a horrid monster. Polyphemus was, so there's our simple past, ram reserat, ramos rates erant. So let's make sure we get that in the past tense, third person singular. Polyphemus was a, as you know, Latin tends not to use a or the, so we need to add that in our translation. A horrid monster, and then informe, hideous, and huge, or even large. So hideous. And let me see the, oh yeah, they don't have any conjunction, so huge. So also fairly straightforward, although ingens and informe are both third declension adjectives. So all of these examples have, at least most of them do. This one doesn't, but the others do have a third declension adjective. And how do we know that? Well, because it doesn't end in a first or second declension spelling or ending. It has a third, for example, is or some other less predictable ending. Let's move on to number 6. Varium et mutabile semper femina. So here we have Virgil. So our subject here is femina, so that's important to recognize because it ends in a, so the nominative is always the subject. So the word order in this one requires some attention. So a woman is always fickle and changeable. So let me write that out and then we'll try to explain it. A woman is always fickle and changeable. Needless to say, that it's difficult for us perhaps to read a sentence like this just because of our notions of gender, but clearly the Romans didn't have these notions, and I think certainly in reading Virgil, a more judicious reading would be to remember that in this context, the gods themselves were very fickle and variable and changeable. We think of modern ideas such as evolution. We can't get into this over the internet, obviously, but contemporary people tend to think things are more permanent and more fixed. And it does raise questions about just exactly who's being intolerant, if I could be a little bit provocative in this format, insofar as people like to, browbeat others with their so-called opinions, which is really probably some presentist, undeveloped, unlearned understanding of human nature and how life works so that they can feel good about themselves so that they don't have to change or try to change their lives in any meaningful way. But going back to point here, in Virgil's case, the gods themselves were very mutabile and very varium, and so I think we put it in that context because Virgil wasn't thinking about politics and gender. All right, moving on to number 7. Facile est epigrammatica belle scribere, sed librum scribere difficile est. Here's Martial, along with Juvenal, one of the great satirists of ancient Rome and Latin literature. So probably, once again, we'll work our way through the vocabulary. So it is easy. So easy is short poems, beautifully to write, but book to write is difficult. I can attest to that. Maybe you can as well. Writing a poem, although not easy, I think all of us right now could sit down and write a poem. Again, kind of putting aside the quality of the poem, but sitting down and writing a book, first of all, it's not going to happen right now. And second, many of us would never be able to finish it because we wouldn't have a clear concept or recognize how difficult it is. So that's sort of the sense of it is here. So it is easy to write scribere, and then a beautiful short poem. So let's go ahead and write that out first. It is easy to write a beautiful short poem. So this is where it's like facile, facility. So it is easy to write a short, beautiful poem. or a beautiful short poem, but it is difficult to write a book. So there's our librum, second declension accusative singular, tells us it's the direct object. But it is difficult to write a book. So this chapter is fairly straightforward, which is good because the last two chapters in this class are going to be a little bit trickier grammar-wise, as you'll see next week. So, yeah, so once again, I want to just sort of suggest that so far, just looking up the words in a dictionary, taking your time doing so, and learning the vocabulary, and I think these don't present that great of difficulty. With that said, we still need to be mindful of word order and endings in Latin. So here's a good example. This actually is the verb in the imperative going all the way to chapter 1. So it means control your mind, like regent, regency, rex. Rex means king. So what we have here is anger, or I guess here furor. So the wrath and anger is short. Control your mind, or ire. So I guess so they're actually using. I'm surprised they don't have an enclitic here. So let me just kind of see what. So I guess anger is kind of the double sense of this here. So going back here, so anger is a short madness. Control your mind. There we go. So anger, ire, is a short madness. Control your mind. So anger is a short madness. And let me take a look at the punctuation here. They have a semicolon. Control your mind. Okay, so anger, ire, is a short brevis madness. So brevis is a third declension adjective. And then rege, which I mentioned earlier, is the imperative form of rule. So rege, present active imperative, second person singular, means here they have rule or guide. I said control. But if you want to say rule your mind or control your mind, get your emotions under control, is the sense of it. All right, let's do, we're almost making good pace here. So ars poetica est non omnia dicere. So the art, or literally the poetic art, but the art of poetry is not to say everything. So silence is golden. The art of poetry is not to say everything. In other words, leave some things to the imagination, to interpretation, to the reader. Let him or her participate in it. So the art of poetry. So here it's actually in the nominative, but if you say poetic art, is not to say everything. That sounds weird in English, I believe. So the art of poetry is, est, not, non, to say, dicere, everything. And let's see, we'll do one more here. Nihil est et omni parte beatum. This one can be a little bit tricky. Literally, nothing is from all parts beautiful. Now, what does that even mean? Is the sense of it is that beauty is a kind of wholeness or completeness. So this one we have to be a little bit creative, perhaps, with our translation. So it means nothing is beautiful by itself, or nothing is beautiful if removed from all parts. So this one's a little bit hard to translate, but literally nothing is from all parts beautiful. So nothing is beautiful if separated from itself. I'm going to give kind of a free translation here. Nothing is beautiful. Oops. If, although I guess beatum could mean, or I think about it, this could also mean happy. So let's look this up here. Yeah, so I'm glad I looked this up because this could mean a lot of things. So it can mean blessedness, good fortune, good circumstances. So let's see if that changes our reading here. So nothing is blessed or nothing is happy apart from itself, apart from all things. Let's see here. This one. Let's see what beatum here is. Nothing is rich from itself. Nothing is blessed. Nothing is, let's try this here. So there is no happiness apart from all things. I'm gonna go with that one right there. Change that a little bit here. This one's a little bit tricky without a broader context, if I'm being honest. So nothing, excuse me, there is no blessedness apart from all things. This one's tricky to translate, but the idea is pretty clear that literally there is nothing from all things that is blessed. So the idea that to be blessed is to consider your life as part of a greater whole, a greater purpose is the sense of it, I believe. But the Latin as given here is a little bit tricky. All right, let's take a look at, so once again, we'll just do 1 through 10. Let's take a look at Juvenal explains his impulse to satire. So I'm going to go ahead and put that down here for our topic. All right, so Juvenal explains his impulse to satire. Of course, what is satire? A kind of social criticism. Juvenal, of course, along with Martial, was a great, here's some information about his dates. He was a great Roman satirist, so you definitely want to take a look at this. All right, let's take a look at the Latin here. Juvenal, of course, is the one who talked about bread and circuses. Is what the masses want is entertainment. How do you keep people unenlightened, and how do you control people? Is, well, you give them what they want, and most people want to be entertained, and most people want money, most people want pleasure. So society that controls people by making society all about fun is arguably an unenlightened society, according to Juvenal. And it's certainly something to consider about our own society. All right, Juvenal explains his impulse to satire. Semper ego auditor ero, est turba poetarum in haec urbe, ego igitur ero poeta sunt milia vitiorum in urbe, de istis viti scribam, difficile satram non scribere, si nature me audivare non potest, facit indignatio versum, in libro meo erunt omnia facto hominum, timor ire voluptas culpae cupidatidis insidiae. Nunc est plena copia vitiorum in haec misere urbe Romae. All right, let's take a look at this. We do have some vocab down here, but you'll probably have to look up some words for this one. Here we have actually the future tense with ero. Once again, there's no, as we saw in this previous example, there's no substitute for taking your time and looking up the words. Here we have future active, indicative, first person singular. So, and then we have a question mark here. So this is a rhetorical question. Will I always be a listener? So an auditor is someone who listens. So will I always be a listener is how that first sentence reads. So we'll write this down here. Will I always be a listener? So will I erro, always, semper, I, ego, and then auditor, like to audit or audible, is listener. Esterbe poetarum hec urbe, there is a crowd of poets in this city. Everybody thinks they're a poet, everybody thinks they're a critic. So there is a crowd of poets in this city. There is, est, a crowd, turba, of poets. There is our first declension genitive plural, arum. So there is a crowd of poets in this city, in haec urbe, in this city. In haec urbe, notice that urbe is third declension ablative singular, because we're answering where, so there ends in the letter E, in haec urbe. So let's go ahead and write that down. There is crowd of in this city. I, therefore, will be a poet. I, therefore, so since everybody thinks they're a poet, I too will become or be a poet. I, therefore, will be, so we haven't had this verb very often, so this is future tense, will be a poet, so sum, I am, eram, I was, erro, I will. So those are our basic verb tenses for first person singular. There are millions of vices in this city. So sunt, milia, of vices, notice that's second declension, genitive plural, orum, so there are thousands of vices in this city. So we just explained in this city just a moment ago. So let's go ahead and write that down. So there are thousands of vices in this city. So sunt, there are thousands of vices in this city. I will write, so here's also future tense, scribam. So we might have to look it up to verify it's future tense. It is. So scribam, I will write about those vices. So I'm going to go ahead and write this down here. So I will about those vices. Taking a look at this one in a little bit greater detail, what we can see, of course, is scribam is future tense. So once again, if you're not sure, you gotta look it up. This one is future active indicative singular. We haven't had subjunctive yet, so just use a little bit of logic and common sense. So it's not going to be subjunctive, even though it has the same form. And so I will write is scribam. And then I will write what? I will write about day, and then day is always followed by the ablative. So second declension ablative plural is is, de istis, vitis. So we take a look at our endings here. Is, de vitis, istis. And so there's our ablative endings because we're using the ablative preposition de or about. It is difficult not to write satire. So difficile est satiram non scribere. It is est, so remember est means it is, difficult, difficile, not to write, non scribere. It is difficult not to write, saturam is satire. So it is difficult not to write satire. It is difficult not to write satire. Now, why is this the case? Well, because there's a lot going on. If everybody thinks they're a poet and you're living in a large city of Rome and there's a lot to observe and a lot of people are doing things that lend themselves to criticism and satire is the direction we're going here. So it is difficult. Think of Saturday Night Live or similar show or The Office. It is difficult not to write satire. If nature is not able to help me, indignation makes my verse. In other words, that if I can't just do it spontaneously, then I will use my indignation via my critical thinking of what I'm seeing to make facit my verse. So if nature is not able, non potest, to help, adiuvare, we had that earlier, me. So let's go ahead and write this clause down. If nature is not able to help me, indignation makes my verse. Latin tends not to use my or your, so we got to put that in here. But versum is second declension accusative singular, accusative versum, indignatium facit versum. All right. In libro, of course, we just had a book earlier, so something about in book. In my book, there will be all kinds of human deeds. So let me write that down here. So in my book, there will be all kinds of human deeds, literally human facts. So in libro, so here we have ablative, second declension, ablative singular is O. So, but in my book, and then erunt is future tense. So we got to look that up perhaps. So we got to make sure we get the tenses right. There will be all kinds of, because third declension, genitive plural is so hominium. There will be all kinds of human deeds. So literally, in my book will be all deeds of men. And what kind of deeds or facts or behavioral observations is Juvenal talking about? Fear, anger, pleasure, blame, desire, treachery. Some of these might have different possible translations, but this is where we get words like timid, irate, voluptuousness, culpability, cupidity or desire, and then insidious means treachery. So you might want to look up some of these for alternative translations, but I'm going to go with my reading of it here. So fear, anger, and voluptuousness, or literally pleasure. I'm going to go fear, anger, pleasure. Fear, anger, pleasure. And then we also have guilt or desire and treachery. Guilt, desire, treachery. That's just basically just vocab. There is now plenty of vices in this miserable city of Rome. Literally, there is now a copious amount of vices in this miserable city of Rome. So let me write this out and then I'll try to explain it. There is now a copious amount of vices in this miserable city of Rome. This word copious sounds a little bit awkward in contemporary English, but I'm going to keep it just because it is consistent with the word copia. But literally, now is plenty amounts of vices in this miserable city of Rome. So Romae is first declension genitive singular, AE. So there is, or excuse me, now, nunc, there is, est, plenty, plena, amount, copia, of vices, of vitiorum is second declension genitive plural, so of vices. In, haec is this, miserable city of Rome. Notice that misere urbe, misere is first declension, ablative singular, then urbe. Why? Because we have the ablative of place in misere urbe, because we're using the ablative which describes where or place in Latin. All right. I'm not able to live with you or without you. I am able to live neither with you nor without you. So, temperamental friend. All right, that was it for today. As I mentioned, next week, the grammar is going to be a little bit trickier because we got the relative pronoun. And then the chapter after that is passive, I believe, which, yeah, that's going to be a major topic. And so those are our last two chapters for this semester. But these are going to be challenging topics. So if you find you're in a good place with your Latin right now, you might want to start browsing ahead these last two chapters to get a handle on the grammar, which is going to be a little bit trickier. Not trickier, but it's going to add another depth to Latin grammar. And because passive is something that, as English speakers, we tend not to use or are aware of, you can see it's going to be hard to perhaps understand it by using English because our reference point will not be as clear, but we're going to need to know that reference point and understanding for the chapter. All right, valete.